So I just have a few minutes to respond to that. And I'm going to tell 3 stories, and I have visual aids. This is a picture that hangs in my office. It was left to me by my friend Donna, who died in 1992. And when I was visiting her in her last days, we saw a child at the beach facing the waves, face up toward the sun. And we thought of hope and joy. And because of the palliative context, we also, and her outstretched arms, we also thought of the cross. And for us, it was an illustration of the ambiguity of life, of trouble and beauty, of tears and laughter, of sorrow and joy, of cross and resurrection. Years later, when I was teaching at CCS, this photograph of the little girl at the seashore was on my wall. And a first-year student, I was in a student interview with her, and she was feeling rather vulnerable. She had the burdens of her own crosses in her life. And she looked at this little girl with the arms outstretched, and she said, "Maybe one day that could be me." Despite the burdens of her own cross, she felt longingly and poignantly in the photograph she could see hope and joy and freedom. Then, through the rest of this student's time in the program, we watched as her tentative, uncertain, shy, even fearful self became a vibrant, strong, new self. Transformed through the support and challenge of CCS, she found her incredible voice. She took on enormous challenges, and she now fearlessly challenges and engages the world and the church with passion and zeal. I feel incredibly lucky that I have been part of so many similar journeys and adventures. The work that we do as program staff empowers and equips, encourages, and enables people to embrace their vocations. And that's such a privilege. In all the reflections received, all the sessions planned, all the leadership offered, all the theology discussed, in all the skills developed, there is such evidence that our students are willing to grow and to learn. And to be part of people's lives in such a fulfilling and challenging way is wonderfully abundant. I'm very thankful for the last 17 years. It has been felt like holy ground. When Sherry McConnell and I were teaching together, we got into the habit of praying together before every morning, before the learning circle. These are tiny little blue stones, glass stones. And one learning circle, there's inexplicably was a pile of them on our staff table. And somehow we got into the habit of pushing a stone, a bead forward, and offering a prayer of intercession for a student who was struggling, for someone in our own families, or for something that just came up in the news. We pushed a bead forward and we'd offer a prayer of thanksgiving for a new insight, for a relationship that was really supportive, for something that felt like a blessing. I have loved that this job honors the spirit of prayerful reflection. It's integrated into the very work of this institution and movement. Every morning at Learning Circle, we start with worship and check-in. Every week, we gather as staff for worship. And in both those venues, often a theme emerges from a lectionary or a period of the year, a scripture's read, and frequently impromptu reflections are invited around the circle, and prophetic witness is offered, wisdom is shared. As a rule, we sing a cappella, and when we find the right pitch, our voices combine to make rich harmony. Always we intertwine prayer and reflection with the work. And I have been blessed that these opportunities for worship center the day and the week in the call to faithfulness, in the busyness of staffing a program and running a theological institution, in the intensity of a marathon learning circle. We stop to collect ourselves and our spirits, to connect with one another and the broader community, and to place the work and our lives in the context of the holy. And that's been a huge blessing. This is one of those Circle of Friends sculptures. And it reminds me of the very communal nature of CCS. And I remember one of my very first learning circles, in those days they were called LICs, Learning in Community. And we were 20 to 20-some people experiencing a new beginning after the move to Winnipeg. There was new staff, one lone continuing staff, participants from the residential program, and participants from the 1995 regional program. Carolyn and Deborah were both part of that group. The people lived from across the country, from Vancouver Island to Newfoundland. And over lunch, we went round the table. Each student participant was asked to name what their field placement was and what they were doing. And this was the social ministry year. So there were some experiencing inner city ministries. Others were involved in the corrections system. There were cross-cultural placements and adult literacy work. A variety of people were serving women's shelters. And the student from Newfoundland was developing a project for communities dealing with the COD moratorium. Each one was committed to their ministry of compassion and connection. Each one was doing advocacy and justice making. Each one was taking risks to learn and to grow. And with only a few snippets, scraps of stories really, I was moved by the breadth and the depth of these networks. Here was an exciting, alive vision of the church, not wrestling with institutional politics, not stuck in the seduction of sentimental piety, not going through the mere habit of ecclesiology, but an embodiment of faith and love of neighbor. I found it incredibly hopeful, and I was so glad to be a part of that community. The diaconal work of bridging world and church is not seen in our program as an extra or optional, but a fundamental and essential part of the program. Later in the week, this sense of hopefulness deepened and participants shared in their field placement experiences. And there was an opportunity to integrate our theological reflection with our personal experiences, to connect the assigned readings and scholarship. It was a powerful mix of personal experience and social analysis, of intellectual wrestling and spiritual insight. And I feel enormously rewarded by the rich excitement of this work. It's an amazing blessing to be included in the life of a community that is committed to a theology of justice and that strives to live that world in a world that needs it so much. So just let me finish with thanks to the students and my staff colleagues through the past and present. Appreciation for my friends who have been there, and my deepest gratitude to my partner and best friend, Janice.